Game begin.
I forget his name. But no, it's like it's a canvas print, and he kind of doctored it up a bit.
Oh.
I wish it was. I don't have the money for the original prints.
Do you skate? What about the DC hat? Tell me about the DC hat.
No, I don't skate, but I had a lucky DC hat at 1998 Nationals.
So that's the hat?
It is a replica. The hat.
He's got a replica Recurring Nightmare painting and a replica
DC
hat.
Yeah,
and he was handing out replica Recurring Nightmare.
Brian, is anything about you real?
Everything's a replica.
Everything's a replica. Are you even the original Brian Selden, or are you just an android?
Yeah.
I mean, can't you get some better Mistress Factories? I mean, like, saw those horrible Mistress Factories you had in play, and I'm like, oh, he won with those last year, actually, right?
Yeah, they're the real ones are in my old school deck, and I didn't want to like have to flip them back and forth. I got 4 Antiquities ones, but I just can't flip it. I don't know. I don't want to have the stress of not having a deck put together.
Every single person that I talked to that was playing both Premodern and Old School said basically the exact same thing when we were just like pointing out their like white bordered City of Brass and their like, 5th edition Hydroblast and what. And then every single time they're like, oh, it's in my Old School deck. Like Sam Black's Premodern deck had just like a bunch of like garbage in it, like new bordered Karmic Justice and whatever nonsense. And he was like, my old school deck looks nice, I promise. And then he just like took his old school deck pick and
so old school deck is like $400,000, right?
Oh yeah, you're right, because he has black border everything. But it's crazy because he's just like nonchalantly laying it out, and he's like,
how do you carry that around?
Well, he had the loner. Okay, we're turning Sam Black into a mark for for burglars, but I was like
already.
I had a few rules for the Spike Colony house, and one of them was that if you were in the Spike Colony house, we had podcast rights to you, and that's how Brian Selden is on the cast today. He didn't know this. As soon as he stepped across the
I feel like I should have dibs on whoever drafted me on Will's podcast, right?
Wow. Oh, that's a good point. Who was that?
Will.
Was it Will?
Yeah.
So Will has graciously ceded the podcast rights to the North American 2-time champion, but he has vacuumed up all of the other people. So I obviously dibbed. So my rules were dibs on anybody who set foot in the Spike Colony house and all New Yorkers. And then the rest is all Will. And then Premodcast, the individual who ran the tournament is getting the table scraps somehow. Not sure how that's fair, but yeah, Jared was very gracious. He was just like, well, we had Seldon last year, so
yeah, no, and I felt obligated last year to talk with those guys.
No, we had a conversation. I tried to slide the dib in at the bar. We were at bar when people were doing table ante, and I was like, hey, I've got this new...
No one remembers whatever negotiations happened at the bar.
Yeah. New podcast project. It's going to be
I was on like cloud 9. I was like, yeah, of course, I'll do all the podcasts, and I realized I just don't have enough to talk about.
Yeah, you're just like big non-competes.
Will graciously gave me the draft win. I tried to give it to him, right? Under letter of the law, it's a three-way tie because
how do you get points?
Top eight.
Top eight
is 1 point. That's it.
Yeah. So I had Andy Levine, and then Javi, and then you, right? So it's 3-way tie. So I'm like, but Will, you should get it. I mean, you actually had the tournament winner, and then we looked at like total breakdown, and I'm like, I have like 4 people in the top.
Yeah, the top 32. Yeah,
and like nobody else. Everyone's like one guy in the top 8 or something, and like nobody in the top 32. They're like, it's pretty clear who won this draft.
I mean, you guys have like such a leak there because you know all the good New York players.
Yeah, we do. I mean, Andy Levine was like.
At SWB.
SWB is just like, yeah.
Yeah, like.
The facts of the matter are, welcome to season 2, episode either 1 or 2 of the Spike Colony podcast, the podcast that was born after Lobstercon. After a year of gaining clout, we finally have all rights reserved the two-time North American Continental Premodern champion, Brian Selden. Brian, welcome to the podcast. Big fan of your work.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm glad you got the Saturday with 74 of the 75.
Yeah, oh yeah, because you got it. I had 3 hydroblasts.
Oh, you moved a blast for a blast?
I just blasted. I did blast for a blast. I don't even think I have. I think I had the bibs, but I'll tell the short story. I had 2 hydroblasts, and then I have the SW blast. So I have a playset of black bordered hydros, but the very first time I sat across the table from our very own Stephen Wyatt Bush, he was carrying around a box of 5th edition boosters, and he gave me one, and I opened it, and I opened the hydroblast, and I had him sign it for me. Fast forward many months later, Stephen's one of my favorite people, and I SW blasted somebody out of the finals.
There was a Goblin King in mine. A terrible white border Goblin King, and that is in the sideboard of my Lanny Goblin stack.
Yeah, there we go. So the 3 of us are on this call, but I think Brian and I are in resounding agreement that all glory goes to the individual by the name of David Raska, the architect of Mono Blue. I'm calling it David Rexia, but we're taking we're trying to figure out the name. I felt like Surf and Turf is reasonable because it's like shrimp and land destruction, but
like that.
I really do think so. David Raska is DR, so maybe we could call it Dr. Surf and Turf, but you'll keep working on
Dr.
this.
Surf and Turf is a good name. Lanny, are you going to the meetup tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to swing by. Because I have to pick up some SD cards from Bill and give Sonny his foil Parallax Tide. But Brian, I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell us. I have my opinion. What is your opinion of Dr. Surf and Turf?
Of the deck, or are you talking of Raska?
Of the deck, like
the deck.
So I guess I'll set you up. People are saying this is same old Mono Blue Dreadnought, just a couple of cute little ads, but this is just a one weekend thing. This is just like nothing special, nothing to see here. We're gonna move on like life is the same. What would you say to those people?
So I can understand it. It doesn't look that different, right? The main deck is 4 cards off from some of the other Mono Blue decks around. But the sideboard and the sideboard mapping that, I think both of us use, Lanny, is really transformative. It like some of the weakest matchups just turn into, not quite buys, but they just,
it feels like it.
Yeah, it's just like the times I played Tide against multiple people, they just like looked and they said, I don't know how I beat this. And they're just like, and they pack it up. And, against Black-White Control, I played Fritz.
Shout out Fritz. He was in the Spike Colony.
Yeah, round 3 or 4, and he's like, I don't think I can keep up with that deck now. Like, it's such a good juke too, because these decks come in with so much interaction, right? Because no one wants to lose to a turn 2 protected Dreadnought, so that all the interaction comes in, and then all our most of our Dreadnoughts come out, and we just go into this other juke plan, and it's just so powerful to really kind of hit it from a different angle. Is it going to be the best deck in the format? It certainly has a better matchup spread than the regular Mono Blue deck, I think. But it does struggle with goblins. It does struggle with elves. The Bant, Terrageddon, it was my only loss. That felt really challenging.
But that's the asterisk. I walked over to the feature match area and Javi had Thornscape Apprentice in play. Like, that's not a commonly played card. I was just like, 0% chance Seldon wins this game. There's a literal tapper in play.
Every game against Javi was much, much closer than it looked. Like, every single game. Like,
you had a shot. You're stockpiling stifles.
He played a Sylvan library. My next draw was a null, right? And he drew four cards off of it. Like, things like that. It was just like the games were much closer than they looked, especially the stream games. But that matchup does seem pretty challenging. just because you're just so vulnerable to mage. Our the sideboard strategy was not using tides in the the kind of the green-white.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. They have Moxes, they have Wayfarer. Like, you tide them, it just doesn't really matter.
I don't know.
And then Wayfarer also helps them cut off your ability to leverage Mist Refractory because they're just always going to have the Wasteland for it.
Yeah, right. I think the factories have to come out because you don't want to get wastelanded. But I don't know. They felt like they just kept developing their mana. They landed a Sylvan Library, drew up to 4 extra cards, and then were able to call the Herd Me Out and just had a ton of interaction. So that matchup seems hard, but I know the control matchups seem maybe they juke in a different way now that they know that Parallax Tide is a new.
Well, they have to try to be the beatdown, right?
Yeah,
because they have no inevitability anymore. Like the inevitability.
What do you mean by control, Brian? Like land still?
Yeah, land still I think changes. Black-white control changes. Even the games I played in the test house against a dedicated Tide deck, it's like I can get my Tide down sooner, and I have Daze, Foil, Gush backup to get it down. And
you're a better Tide beatdown.
Yeah, it's like it's much easier to just kind of go all in on that and try to carry the Tide to win the game. And once you take the tempo of 5 of their lands, especially if you have the Chain of Vapor, but even if you don't, you can stifle the trigger. It sets them back so far. So the control matchups were always a little bit of a challenge. And I think the Tide really makes it a much better matchup. And Replenish too. Replenish is another deck that this deck struggles against. It's just like they have to tap out for something, right? Because
everything costs 4.
Maybe they make all their land drops, but eventually they have to try to land something. If you can try to match land for land drops, which is hard with 18 lands, but assuming you can do that, they generally have to act first, and then you can kind of nail them with Tide.
But you have a 4 impulse to their probably 0 impulse, multiple flash.
Well, we're working on that, but
3 after sideboarding, and then opt also important. I think you're okay keeping pace with them because they don't threaten you until turn 4.
I'm really glad that Brian said that they had to act first, because long have people told me that specifically mono blue Dreadnought is favorable into Replenish, and my response was always like, that's not my experience. Like, mono blue Dreadnought has to act first because they need to win through combat, whereas Replenish can sit back, load up on all their resources. When the mono blue player finally jams, you have all your Seal of Cleansing, Orm's Chance, Swords of Plowshares, and then you untap and you have all your Parallax Wave Replenish, and you have access to maybe Exalted Angel.
You might have esoteric cards too, right? Like I played Mana Short when I had.
Absolutely.
Mana Short is just a straight up.
Yeah. It's a super ace because then
go home against a Dreadnought, right?
Yeah. Then they're restricted to foil in their following turn. And then anyway, so but there was 2 things that changed this. One was Meddling Mage, which all of a sudden meant that Dreadnought had a compact threat to back up with counterspells. But now that you have Tide, I don't even know what Replenish players are going to do. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You either jam stuff into counterspell and then get tided, or you just wait up and then eventually Dreadnought's going to find a spot where they can throw down to the Tide. Orm's Chant doesn't interact too favorably with Tide. You would have to have a Seal of Cleansing into play, respond to the Tide with Orm's Chant, and then Seal of Cleansing that same turn. Is just like all too narrow. But I wanted to talk about 2 different time scales. I want to talk about what you've been up to, Brian, in the year since your last championship win. But I also wanted to give a quick intro to the audience at home about who you are. We had a talk in the car. You were just a kid in '98, right?
I was 17. Yeah. 17 turning 18.
And so
your parents let you go to the World Championship.
Did they have to sign a slip?
It was in Seattle. It was I traveled with a friend. I stayed in the University of Washington dorms. I don't know how I got in there, but my buddy and I stayed in the dorms and went to the
most dorms you can swipe in one guest. So
but you had played in the U.S. National Championship a month earlier.
I did. That was
9th.
Yep. So that was the kind of me hitting the scene. in kind of my mind, because I don't even remember what I played there.
Stupid green.
Stupid green.
Yeah.
But I showed up to that tournament, got 9th place at U.S. Nationals. I still have the standing sheet and kind of like the drawer next to my bed. I was off by two. I was off by 2 decimal spots of getting to the top 8 at U.S. Nationals. I was so close. Missed it. Guess I used that little fire in my belly to.
You cashed in your one time.
I did, yeah. And then I wasn't even at that point. I wasn't even qualified for Worlds. I'm not sure at the time. I think you have to be top 4 to qualify for Worlds.
But yeah,
you're part of the team.
If you do 9th at U.S. Nationals, you would have been qualified on rating. I know this from experience, right? So it doesn't matter how bad you are going into the tournament. It's like a 128K rating event where you had to have gone like X and 3, right? So you probably were composite at top 10 at that point.
So I recalled this story last year on the pre-modcast, but I did not. So I was monitoring my rating like, every day, so everything. I really tried to protect that rating as much as I could. I had a very massive rating at the time, and I just missed the cut for whatever reason. I just missed the cut.
9th on breakers and then missed the cut on rating.
But what I noticed was there was a bunch of foreign names that just bubbled all the way up to the top of this ranking. I think all from the Malaysia, the Philippines, somewhere in Eastern Asia.
Philippines. No, not a single honest person in that entire country.
I think it was Malaysia.
I love the name of Malaysia.
Apparently they, I got noticed, I think much later than most of the other people that got invited to the World, saying there was like some fraud in different LGSs out in Malaysia, and they scrapped the invites to a half a dozen people, and it rolled down to me. And that's how I ended up getting into the World's tournament.
Plot armor. The rest is history. So after winning that, we were discussing in the car, did you just sort of dive back into your studies, go to college? Like, tell us what's been happening in the last 26 years since we saw you on the world stage.
Yeah.
As regards to Magic,
Yeah, sure. So that was my senior year of high school. At that point, like, I quit sports that I was doing my senior year, really tried to focus in a little bit more on Magic. And I think did reasonably well. I don't remember the number of my top 8s or top finishes, but I did pretty darn well in the next year or 3 years that I played professionally. I think at least a couple of top 8s, a top 4, or finals with the team. So I did very respectfully. Top 8 in the nationals the next year. So I was kind of on fire in some respects. And at some point, I went to college. I went to UC Berkeley up in Northern California, and I just couldn't balance it all. Like, I tried to balance freshman year and Magic and, college life. And, I did freshman year, I did part into sophomore year, and then it just kind of, the wheels came off, and I had to give up on this Magic chasing, which is probably for the best. If I quit school and got into professional Magic, I probably would have gotten to the poker scene, and who knows where the hell that would have gone from there.
You'd probably be like a billionaire.
Yeah, you'd probably, yeah.
I know a lot of the guys who chose Magic instead of school.
You might be wearing a couple bracelets right now. I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing.
They all did okay. They all live in big apartments in New York.
Yeah, you might have just ended up. You might have just done Magic Poker Wall Street, right?
Could be. So then I was lights out of Magic for 15 years.
Yeah.
Would rarely ever rarely kept up with anything. I was just complete lights out until my kids had a play date, and the dad came over and saw there was a Magic card out just by happenstance.
And then dads had a play date.
And then dads had a play date, and we bought a box of Dominaria, and we played that. I got into old school, then sold all my Premodern cards that I found, bought into old school. Later found out that I didn't really like old school much. So then
back into Premodern.
Yeah, all your Mox diamonds and LED.
I had all of the cradles, all the diamonds.
The cradles,
sold them all
survivals.
For the survival that I kept.
Yeah. Nostalgia. Yeah. Okay.
But then, in my basement, I opened up a box and I found a bunch of the old World Championship mats. And I found a guy that bought them for like an insane amount of money, $1,500 a piece.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And
Holy.
I had 3, 4, 5 of them.
I mean, that guy's probably stoked too.
He was a Yu-Gi-Oh guy of all people. I don't even know how you say that.
What does that mean?
Yu-Gi-Oh. The game. Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yu-Gi-Oh.
So,
Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yu-Gi-Oh was the underground online. That was an entertainment
website. He a Yu-Gi-Oh guy.
Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, like, apparently they like magic, odds and ends, and he bought a bunch of them for me, and that funded my purchase back into Premodern, and then there I've been ever since.
And so you're an engineer now, or is that right? Okay, sweet.
I work for a startup company in the Boston area. Cool.
So a year ago, over a year ago now, you won the championship with Landstill, and Land Tax got banned. So like, tell us about what decks you were playing for the last year, because I've seen you out in these streets with Survival Madness, with Blue White Dreadnought. But what else? Like, I guess what happened after Phyrexian Furnace, and like what you were bouncing around and what your goals were. Like, I feel like you're always out in the streets, but your engagement with Premodern just seems to be kind of at your leisure, not particularly like, I see your name pop up in the Massachusetts area tournaments from time to time, but it's not like you're out there grinding, not like you're out there or whatever. So yeah, just tell us all about the last year in Premodern for you.
Yeah, I just don't have the time to grind, and probably for the best, because I probably would grind a lot more than I do. So I do the monthlies. I probably do 3 out of 4 monthlies, maybe 2 out of 3 monthlies. I had just attended my first Duress quarterly tournament where I was drew into 9th place with Mono Blue Dreadnought. So that was the more recent history. But no, after winning with Landstill, kind of the wheels came off when Oath wasn't around for a deck for like Landstill to prey upon. So I was looking for something different. I wanted something creature-based. I wanted something using survival and the survival madness. I never really lived in the madness era, so I kind of wanted to live that dream a little bit. I kind of stopped playing at the point where madness was the top deck in the field. So I played with that for a while. When got to a finals of one monthly, was one screw up against Nick Mayo away from top 8ing the Hartford tournament.
SCG Hartford, you were there?
Yeah, I was there.
Nice.
So I wanted to support their Premodern effort, so I went there. I think I was top 20, top 16. I missed the top 8 in part because of that some stupid mistake I made. And then I've kind of started to just play around with different decks. So I've played Mono Blue Dreadnought in a monthly, played that in the Duress tournament. The most recent tournament, I played some green-white Threshgeddon deck. I played the white-black control deck in one monthly. So I just kind of dipped my toes in the water of a bunch of the different decks, trying to figure out what deck kind of fit my style, what deck did I like the play patterns to, and I think Mono Blue, the Dreadnought deck, just between the raw power and some of the free wins you get out of it, kind of really appealed to me.
Did you play much Blue-White Dreadnought, or have you always just been the Mono Blue guy?
Yeah, I just picked up the Mono Blue deck. I think I picked it up right after the man won the Spanish.
Juan Sanz, Juan Sanz, something like that.
Yeah, the Nationals, and I said, let me see what this deck's about. And it felt really powerful. It kind of felt a little bit like a glass cannon. But the deck felt like it has a ton of agency to it.
Yeah, well, it's Gorilla Glass now. So how did you link up with Dr. Surf and Turf? Yeah,
so there's the Discord channel, the Mono Blue Dreadnought channel, that there's a lot of discussion on.
That was completely hidden to me up until after the tournament. I find there's like a little subthread in Discord called Mono Blue Dreadnought, but I probably would have been too proud to even look at it before last week.
I was commenting Raska's win with remember when he won the
Fall Brawl last year, yeah.
Well, not just he also won the deck pick Olympics.
That was a sick pick.
It was absolutely great. I was commenting it, and he beat Feb in the finals, and I'm like, well, I can't really co-sign Mono Blue Dreadnought, but I suppose he's doing all right with this.
Well, he beat Growatog.
That's because of you, Laney.
Well, I commented his semifinal. It was either semifinal or quarterfinal against Robin Lund, and that was like the moment everything broke on that match, because I was just like, Grotog should smash this, like, whatever. And then afterwards, Robin was just like, this deck doesn't smash Dreadnought. And then, like, flash forward the PSS, after I failed to smash Dreadnought on camera again, Robin's in the comments like, everybody talks about, quote unquote, everybody talks about how Grotog smashes Dreadnought, and I just feel like it's a lot closer than they say.
I don't know. I've played that match twice in my life, and I felt smashed. But
I in the side event
each time.
In the side event, I played against Robert, who brought spicy Blinding Angel Grotog to the tournament, and I 4-0'd him in games. Played him in the Swiss, beat him. Played him in the top 8, beat him. But Nick Pin played against him and lost to the Blinding Angel. So there was interesting stuff, but yeah, that Fall Brawl, I think we got a great display on camera of Flash of Insight into Flash of Insight. And I think the biggest thing was that the Mistress Factories did not look like they would ever go coast to coast the way that deck was configured, because that deck had 3 Brain Freeze sideboard instead of 3 Parallax Tide. Yeah. And we're going to have a chat with Raska so we can talk to him about the evolution of the deck, but I can talk about my reaction, which was just that I'm like, I saw those 3 Mistress Factories and I'm like, there's no way these are dealing 20 damage. Like, they're just there to block Meddling Mage or block whatever, and like the plan is still Dreadnought. And I was maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but this deck,
I totally agree. Like the brain, like the factories are good defensively, they're good to blank Meddling Mages, but the Brain Freeze plan in the sideboard always bothered me. It feels so hard to get aligned. You have to have the exact right matchup, and even then, someone could duress your whole plan out of your hand, right?
Yeah.
And
a lot of decks just play stifles, right? Like,
or stifling,
Dreadnought decks, opposing Tide decks, which you are both, but I mean, they just happen to have stifle in their deck.
Well, it was like I think it was like a somewhat exploitative play to bring in Brain Freeze, because you'd get in these mirrors, like specifically against mirrors and to some extent against Stasis. You would just get into these spots where like people are inflating the stack and then they just get caught with their pants down. But I think definitely in this modern era of Premodern that we're experiencing, there's a lot more awareness over the card Brain Freeze, and then you lose a little bit of that. Yeah. But we've still seen a lot of Brain Freezing, but the thing is, Brain Freeze and Mistress Factories are not the same kinds of friends that Parallax Tide combo and Mistress Factory are.
It's much more of a cohesive, strategy the way it is right now.
I mean,
totally agree.
I think that a lot of things came together for both of you. I mean, obviously Brian first, and then you copied the deck, but like a lot of things were very favorable to Mono Blue Dreadnought with the transformation into Tide that I don't think are necessarily objective, right? Like, there are many metagames where you would rather have Brain Freeze instead of Tide in the sideboard, right? But this weekend, obviously, like, all of those things came together. But if you look at like the spread of like the good players playing red, like none of them had any Pyroblasts. Like, the fact that there was like so fewer Pyroblasts than you would normally expect out of a deck that was 15% of the metagame that last weekend is like, that's just I'm not saying that either of you just specifically exploited that, and I don't even know if you've ever played against any red decks, but like, it's a good matchup in game one, but they literally just pull their pants down. There's nothing, right? Like, what are you going to do, right? They just have 2 mana answers instead of 1 mana answers. And like, I think that the fact that so many people did that was indicative of a universe where you're just going to be more likely to be successful with Mono Blue Dreadnought than you
were. Yeah, that's true, but you started by saying that the difference was like Tide and Brain Freeze would make a difference, and then you landed between playing Dreadnought at all would make a difference. So I would say to address
all the things I said were true. You can address the individual points.
To address individual point one, that is probably where Brian and I might disagree, which is just that I think it is plausible that in all metagames, in all real metagames in Premodern right now, Tide really is better than Freeze. Short of like, because the problem that I have with Brain Freeze, and I'm sure that Brian has too, is that Brain Freeze like is so sort of situational, and it's not proactive, and it only functions in games that are going to be terminal, like in games where you just are going to reach the late game. And as Brian pointed out, like black white control is, if you're going to give them that much time, then eventually they'll put a 5/5 flying on the battlefield, which your deck has no answer to. So you can't freeze them out because you're not likely to be able to compile enough cards in hand and Brain Freezes that you're going to beat Duress Charge Verdict with. And black white controls, one of the huge reasons I love this deck is exactly that, flipping the black white control matchup, which is just rancid before and is now just sort of just feels inevitable. But to address your second point, which is just that how good was Dreadnought going to be in this room? Was it because burn players were underprepared?
The fact that burn players took their pyroblasts out is indicative of a lot of people's opinion about the format.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
I
right?
agree.
So
I agree
that's not a leading.
It's a sign. Yeah, it's an indicator.
But it is a thing that you can exploit.
Yeah, I think that, like, I guess I'll add that this podcast has been insistent that you bring in between 7 and 8 cards for the Dreadnought matchup. This yours truly believes that it's 4 Blast 4 Overload, and we went in previous metagames, we went in so far as to say that it should just be Mog Salvage. The red deck that beat me in the last round that made the top 8 had Mog Salvage. Yeah.
Just for what it's worth.
But the red deck these days, people are just looking for places to fit their Anarchies and Flaring Pains and whatever like other sort of narrow nonsense that just doesn't go as strong as Overload and Blast. But yeah, so I guess that's a good question for Brian. Did you feel like when you had the deck, so we still didn't fully get to how you got it, how you got the PDF, and then what the testing. So like let's talk about.
So we can go there. Yeah. So in the Duress Quarterly, I played a deck like very similar, at least certainly the main deck. As I had been playtesting it, I really liked Flash of Insight. And I think I'm the first time, I think I saw one other instance of someone having 2 Flash of Insights main deck and a mono blue Dreadnought deck. So that I had 2 main deck Flash of Insights, and the whole tournament they overperformed for me in that tournament. And then so I placed 9th, and then Raska had it in the Fall Brawl, the multiple flashes. I think he had 1 and 1.
Okay, interesting.
So he maybe had 2 afterboard. Maybe someone can fact check.
Yeah. Mike has the photo on his Twitter.
The photo on my Twitter. Give me a second. It'll take me a second. He had, I believe he had 1 in the main deck and 2 in the sideboard.
All right.
So he had 3 total.
All right. Yeah. So you got 2 main deck. You're just like, let's start him. Okay.
Yep. And then that kind of started a conversation. Dave reached out to me and we started talking. We had a couple of playtest sessions with the deck, going back and forth. When we first started, he was still on his Sapphire Charm.
Sapphire Charm. I needled you.
What is Sapphire Charm?
It's a meddling mage. Yeah.
Glad you asked.
Exactly.
Sapphire Charm is draw card.
Meddling mage. I'm gonna call on an answer to meddling mage. And now I will listen to what it does.
I check raise that because this particular meddling mage player goes turn 1 or 2 meddling mage. I still don't know
what this card does.
All right, 3 modes. First mode, beginner, next upkeep, draw a card. Second mode, target creature phases out. Or no, not target creature. Target creature and opponent controls.
Yeah.
Oh man, if it was target creature,
of course. Yeah. We know. We get it. We get it. Target creature and opponent controls phases out. What's mode 3?
I don't even know.
Okay, it doesn't matter. Anyways, Vraska just straight up like I'm feeling good. I got my Grotogs. I'm up against Dreadnought. Dream matchup. We're getting into the next phase of the fall brawl at X1. It's gonna be great. And then he just goes Sapphire Charm your Meddling Mage, and I'm like, cool. Let me pull up Scryfall really quick. And then he proceeds to jam. Yeah,
Gives a creature flying is the last mode.
Oh, let's go. Oh, that's relevant. Wait, no, it's not relevant at all. I mean, it's like it'll sometimes stop your opponent from blocking with Drain Charmant tokens, so it's mildly relevant. But anyways, he gets me with Sapphire Charm. So you're ninth. You got your Flash of Insight. You're getting a message from this guy, and it's like, yo, check it out. I'm working on this too. He ships you a list. It's got Sapphire Charm in it.
Yep, and we kept talking and discussing the list, and the Mono Blue Discord at that time was very close to where Dave Kaplan ended up with a Merchant Scroll, a Boomerang, one or two Boomerangs, and if only one Boomerang, there was like a Snap that was in one of the popular lists. But still, Brainflea's playing after sideboard, no Mishra's Factories, 16, maybe 17 lands. But very subtle differences. And then he started telling me, he's like, I have this plan after board, which I had already been soured on Brain Freeze because I just don't like that.
You never got it off, yeah.
I just don't like it. It seems too fragile. I mean, as another tangent, like I had a playtest session with Rich Shea at one of our local shops.
What does he know?
Yeah, what does he know? And I was trying to find a way to beat Replenish. And
what does he know about Replenish?
Yeah, I tried sideboarding into 4 Dandans to be proactive.
Nice, I like that.
And it turns out they still have plows in their deck, so it still sucks.
And shortest in.
So then I got to the plan against Replenish is you just make your land backs, you sit back, and you wait till them to chant you, and you misdirect the chant to them, and then you go, and then you do the whole Brain Freeze plan, and that was like the game plan, and that just seems so insanely fragile that
you've already named like 3 cards you have to have.
Overlap between your two misdirections and
3
the turn that they want to do the orange. I don't even know how to do the math on that.
I know,
but
it seems not, so.
It is not a high percentage times a high percentage.
And then also playing against Rich game ones, like it's like he gets me most game ones, right?
Yeah.
And he only has 2 plows and in his main deck, and there's going to be a lot of decks that come out with 4 plows. So I wanted another way to attack that Replenish matchup. I thought Replenish was going to be the menace of the format and the end of the tournament. Turned out it did okay.
Fine.
But it was
Replenish in the top 8.
Yeah, not nearly the menace that I was predicting it to be.
Well, the menace turned out to be Stasis, 3 of 5 pilots at the top tables all day. Some of them ran
Elves?
into the mirror. Elves, Nick Mayo. Nick Mayo with the 6-0 start. Yeah, lots of surprises.
Yeah. I told you I thought Elves was good, Lanny.
Whatever. Whatever. I refuse to change any of my beliefs at any point in time at the prevalence of new data, so just don't even try.
Yeah, you played Mono Blue Dreadnought after excoriating me for a year about
excoriating the entire pre-modern community.
I mean, like the number of insults hurled in my direction to the point that I was submitted to you and Fran. You're like, I guess these guys just know more than I do. Mono Blue Dreadnought's terrible.
I come to you a humbled man. It's especially humbling because I could I said it in several posts. I was just like I could have gotten in on the ground 4 because Vraska's a great not to mention deck designer, secret weapon builder, leader of Premodern Wakanda, which is the Rochester area. Shout out to Rochester. These guys are out there. They do not post anything. They don't post their tournament results. Their shit doesn't end up on TC decks. Nobody talks to them, it seems. And then they're just
landlocked. They have a force field over.
Premodern Wakanda.
They're just mining vibranium.
Yeah, they're
building 12/12s out of it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, shit, no wonder they
Vibranium 12/12s. We've got these paper 12/12s and they're just getting shredded, and then they just figured out how to reinforce the glass cannon.
When Dave gave me the Tide list, I was like, who else knows about this? He's like, only the guys in Rochester, but they're not going to say anything.
Yeah, they're not going to say shit. It's beautiful. Because I think one of the things that people who don't think very critically about Premodern might say is just kind of like, oh, it's like solved and you can't angle it. And even us, I think Mike and myself and like whatever, we kind of let ourselves settle into this like idea that we just needed to work on the best decks, and granted this is Raska working on the best deck, but like we kind of lost a little bit of, I mean, Mike, you told me yourself where you were just like, I was working my Grotog deck and you're like, you got to lose to something, and sort of like the dead fire in me said that there's got to be a way to build a deck that just really smashes this tournament. There's just no way that there isn't something out there. But it wasn't going to be Nimble, like a single copy of Nimble Mongoose in my Grotog list.
You were like a little critical of my deck choice. I mean, part of it for me was I didn't know I was going to get to go to Lobstercon until a week before, like, yeah,
true,
5 days before, right? So,
and I'm always critical of you.
Yeah. So, but most of the testing I did was I was just metagame punching bag, right? I was just like, every meetup, I was like, what are you planning to play? What decks would you like me to bring? I own all the decks, right? And I'll just play whatever you want into whatever you want to play. And as a result of that, friends of ours switched their decks. Like after the last meetup, they're like,
everyone switched decks.
Yeah,
BK switched decks 4 times. D-Tao switched decks. I was about to switch deck. I was just like between 2 decks. Brian's like sitting right next to me, like with the winning deck, and I'm just like, that's cute, but like I could have just been like. I could have. He was like, he's just like, this is the secret weapon. It's got Chain of Vapor, and I was just like, doesn't that card suck in Dreadnought? And Brian played it down. He's just like, well, you can't cast it with the Dreadnought in play. And I was just like, okay, so that means it. Man, I just so many regrets.
So I played the deck I did in part because Andy Levine said, "Can you imagine cursed scrolling someone with one of those sleeves and revealing the full art?" The full text basic mountain, and I was just like,
I'm in.
Wow, that's just like there's no greater feeling I can imagine in a game of Magic. So
I want to clarify, Brian. You said so. David gives you the list. He said nobody knows about it. But is this still the Sapphire Charm list that he's showing you, or is he just, or this is like a few weeks later and?
Wait, why is it deceptive? Because you fly over the opponent's...
No, you phase out your opponent's meddling mage.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I see.
And it's not blank in any other matchup because you just slow trip up to 11 or 12 cards on the turn that you go off, and you just outcard them.
I love this because I get to
Portent 9.
Yeah, it's Portent. Well, okay, so this deck has already 6 Portents because the Flash of Insight in your graveyard is also a Portent. It's a Mega Portent, right? So the deck could start the next turn with 10 cards in hand instead of 9, and then obviously Sapphire Charm lets you do this thing. I'm happy to have like figured that out on this podcast. I'm not saying I invented it or anything, but I'm glad that's something that is just like, I mean, it's also in the guide or in the text message or the Discord message. It's just like, oh, by the way, you can start the turn with like 10, 11 cards in hand with your flashes and your portents. So Sapphire Charm can do that. That's pretty cool. And then I wanted to point out, while we are shitting on Sapphire Charm, one thing that is super relevant is that if your Sapphire Charm is an unsummon or like a bounce effect too, then the opponent gets to replay the Meddling Mage and name Vision Charm or Foil, which are usually the 2 things that you're planning on protecting your Dreadnought with, and then still kill your Dreadnought. So Sapphire Charm phases out the Meddling Mage, you jam the Dreadnought, the Meddling Mage comes back, it's naming Dreadnought still, and then you get all your protection. So despite Sapphire Charm being the lulz, even something like that small, like, I don't know, it's just like we just don't give this man enough credit. We just laugh in his face at his Mistress Factories and his Sapphire Charms, and it's actually...
I'm not laughing. I didn't know what it did.
Brian and I were laughing.
Yeah. There's clearly thought behind it, and it clearly makes some sense. And you could, in the right metagame, maybe it's fine. But
yeah, but if you're one color in Premodern, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel at some point, right? Like you've got Crumble or Overload, which are playable cards, but they're not as good as the cards that you play in.
It just turns out that Chain of Vapor happens to make a lot more happen behind it.
It reinforces the overlap. That's the thing.
Well, and immensely. Because tiding once doesn't always win you the game, but tiding 4 times
It's like Vibranium Vambraces, right? Like when you put Chain of Vapor in, it's just like, somebody get this man a shield. And, it's punched with Vibranium Vambraces.
the mono blue deck needed bounce spells anyway, right? And you had to pick your choice of boomerang, snap. Some people had merchant scroll, and the cost of having the chain of vapor is, it's real, right? You can't boomerang a land, right? When you're on the play, that often gets them to discard a card
and sets up your days, which is awesome.
And sets up days, so that's a real downside. But it's 1 mana. 1 mana is half as much as 2, and that helps in a lot of cases, especially when you're trying to get a 4 mana enchantment out with 16 lands in your deck, which is kind of an internal tension in the deck as well. But you need these cards anyway, so like changing it over, the utility, like kind of the lost utility of it isn't that great for especially what the juke is of adding tides after sideboard.
So you have the deck, you get your testing sessions done. Do you know, like this, like, are you going in feeling like you're going to win the tournament because you have the deck?
No, not even close.
Okay.
So I still feel like I'm far sub 1% to win the test.
Sub 1%? I thought I was over 1% with Grotog. Like, what?
Just do the math, right? Like, even if you think you have an 80% win rate, the chances of you winning the tournament are
that's not
zero.
That's not how it works. That's not how it works.
I had so many people mulligan against me.
The chances of winning 3 rounds in a row is under 50% at an 80% win rate.
No, that's, sometimes you got to let vibes be a factor. Like the side event, I started 2-0. I get paired against Nick Pin. ID, where an ID is as bad as a loss, because the sandwich was going to give me more equity than playing the match, and I was right. So like that's how you.
I bet you didn't feel so right when 10 Arms
got me.
When 10 Arms got you on camera.
No.
That was among the biggest blot downs I've ever seen.
We'll get to talk to 10 Arms about that specific instance, but no. I was in a spot where mathematically I would scoop to 10 Arms anyways, because I benefited. I stood to gain no benefit from a draw where like the draw was like Prisoner's Dilemma. It hurts both of us.
If you want to watch somebody get blot down, go check out the Duress Crew.
We will talk about this. It's a pretty sweet grift. We talked about
Waiting against 10 Arms. Wow.
10 Arms grifted the shit out of me. It was amazing. But it's funny because it's funny that you were so you lacked in confidence, but I guess it makes sense because like you hadn't played the deck in this kind of context, right? And yeah.
No, and I mean there's some matchups that are this is Premodern, so you hit the wrong matchups and you're gonna go down.
But
right?
you fixed so many of them. You fixed Stasis, you fixed Enchantress, you fixed Black-White Control, Landstill, a Tide Comp, like
yeah. And I almost lost to Goblins on stream.
What is the
to a ball before? Like it just happens.
What is the likelihood that Brian wins 2 consecutive years first place? It's significantly less than 1 in 1,000, right? Like
yeah, but once he's won the first one, then the odds reset. Yeah.
I mean, if I wasn't there, Cameron Heist probably would have won 2 in a row, and so he would have had all the glory that I'm soaking up right now because he can beat everybody except me apparently. These Lobstercons.
Fair.
He's like X and 3 with those 3 losses being me. The past 2 Lobstercons.
Cameron Heiss, I think, will be on Will's podcast, so you'll get to, or he might have already been published on Will, so you'll get to hear all about that. Yeah. It'd be like, my least favorite guy is Brian Selden. I hate that guy. It's like somebody ban him. That's sweet. You have any stories? We're 10 minutes to an hour, so let's get it all out. Let's get out what people want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I can just go through my matchups, which I have kind of written out, and we can go into as much detail as possible, or as we want to. So, like, match 1, I played the Mono Black Contamination deck. I only lost game 2 because he Cabal Therapied, 2 cards at a time. Every single time, 2 cards came out of my hand.
That's the only way that deck gets card advantage.
Yeah, and other than that, Tide carried that game. That game felt like it had some inevitability, because once you don't want to draw the Tide. You want to draw a Flash of Insights and all your other junk that he's making you discard stuff, and then you just find your Tide and the game's over. Round 2, I played Burn. I kind of had the dream game 1. Game 2 was super, super, super close, but I had one more counterspell than he had Burn. Round 3 was on Goblins. That went to 3 games, and she mulled to 4, and it was really close. Game 2 was also against Goblins. Was like I had a pretty good hand until she dropped a turn 2 Tinker or turn 3 Tinker playing around days, and then my game plan really had to change from there.
You would really needed a Sapphire Charm there.
I did need it.
Well, we
needed multiple.
Yeah, you would have needed. It actually doesn't work. So Sapphire Charm wouldn't work unless you were Vision Charmed. But notably, I mean, I guess we shouldn't leak too much, but we don't really start Chain of Vapors game 2 and 3 against Goblins, do we?
No.
Yep.
So I mean, Hydroblast is a better card.
Yeah.
But
oh, okay. So that's better than Sapphire.
You have outs.
Yeah. Round 4, Black White Control. I'm 3-0 at this point. I kind of outgrinded him game 1. Game 2, he didn't have a chance with Tide.
Yeah.
Like that matchup doesn't seem even remotely close.
Even that little sentence outgrinded him game 1. That just doesn't happen without multiple Flash Insight, right?
Yeah. I just kept drawing and drawing and drawing, find the gushes, drawing some more, and eventually, he's trying to do a 7 mana, get a Plains into play every turn.
Look at what they have to do to mimic a fraction of our power. You spend 7 mana to draw 1 card. It's a basic land. You spend 2 mana to look at the top 30.
I think in Black White's defense, so I play tested that matchup a lot with Andy Levine. Not your deck, but the regular Tide Control deck, and just to not bury the lead, the mono blue deck won literally every single game. But he had this thought that, like, if you don't have the chain, they can, like, just sandbag a swamp and then take your stifle, and then it kind of undoes your whole game plan.
Yeah. Like hold back Swamp Duress. So I wanted to ask, at this point, have you done? So you're saying Goblins Burn and Contamination. So at this point, you really haven't gotten the chance to cast Flash of Insight for 20 and then eventually get to your Flash of Insight pile. Did you do it?
On Contamination, it found the Parallax Tide and Black White Control. I mean, Flash of Insight's insane against Black White Control.
So you hit. So far, two matches. You have found your stacked deck with Flash of Insight. Yeah.
Flash of Insight, Demonic Tutored for exactly what I needed and won the game.
Nice.
Round 5 was against a straight green-white Thrushgeddon deck.
Oath deck or creature deck?
Creature deck. He was a legacy player. He laid out a turn 1 Carpet of Flowers against me.
Nice.
And
that's sweet.
I gave him infinite mana for the entire game, and it really didn't matter.
Yep, because that deck does not draw cards.
That card it doesn't use 6 mana every turn to do anything. So he was probably overly aggressive with Geddening and Cataclysms. He wanted to keep me off 3 lands, but he kept 2-for-1ing or going down in cards. And eventually I was able to come back and win that.
I don't even know if I want those cards after game 1.
Yeah, I mean, he Cataclysmed his Sylvan Library away, or his Carpet of Flower, I forget which. It was
right.
Like, it did not seem like a good combo. I'm 5-0 at this point. Round 6, I play Bant Thrushgeddon against Auntie. That game was super close, and this is the game that Svante was watching, and he came up to me afterwards. He said, "You messed up. You needed to portent him." And I thought about it.
Was that the unlock for you?
That was the unlock. That was the absolute unlock.
Let me interject here. So I'm watching the top 8, right? And I commented the finals, but I'm watching the top 8. You're on camera over and over again. I said to Lanny, I go, Seldon has ported his opponent more times in like the last 3 hours than I have my entire life, right? Like, and he looks over, just like, we just have a leak. Like, we should have just been doing this the whole time.
It's because Seldon's a webcam player. Like, he wasn't porting opponents before because logistically it's just not worth it. But now that he's finally in person, it's just like, yeah, hit him.
Yeah,
I've seen you porting on webcam, and it looked fucking obnoxious.
It's hilarious.
That's pretty bad.
Well, I do it. I do it because I'm on stream, so I know. I'm giving the people what they want.
But I mean, literally, I just look over. You probably ported 7 times in the top 8 or something. Like,
I mean, part of that is like how mana screwed most of my opponents were as well. But
yeah, I mean,
still,
if people are going to lay out 2 sphere of resistances and have no land in play, they're kind of asking for it.
Yep.
In my opinion. But I mean, just the number of times I never portented, like, I literally played against actual Alan Comer in 1997. I beat him to win a standard tournament when he was playing Xerox, right? So, and I was just like fascinated by him portenting me and then casting Foreshadow. And I'm like, why don't you just play Thawing Glaciers? He's like, no, this is better. And I'm like, Fire Blast you. And,
Nice.
Good guys won that tournament. But anyway, I was literally playing against actual Alan Comer. So I've been portented back in 1997. I knew you could do it. But when,
Unlock.
came up for me.
Yeah,
now the unlocks happened.
So that unlocked it, and I said, "Oh yeah, of course." Like,
So what was the spot that you? So what exactly was the punt? Like, your opponent just needed something.
So I was in a really. I mean, I had a 12-12 out, I believe, but I was in a really fragile spot where I had nothing. I was hellbent. I draw the card, and
Oh, you porting yourself looking for a counter?
For something.
Yeah.
Just something. And then
Counterspell or Vision Charm, yeah.
And then he was like, "Hey, you just porting them and just make sure they don't have 3 answers on top of their deck, and you win the next turn." So it did work out in my favor in that case. You didn't have an answer on top, but yeah, that was a bit of a leak.
I was gonna play Dreadnought tonight, but I was gonna play Blue White Dreadnought because it's just still together. But I'm gonna strive to port in somebody.
Somebody's getting their ass ported.
Somebody's getting the top 3 cards of their deck looked at, and I'll be honest with you, their deck's probably gonna get shuffled.
Yeah.
After.
Yeah, like, those are good.
It's gonna get looked at.
It's hard to port in your opponent if they have a fetch land, if like whatever. They're just like random stuff.
Yeah, in the top 4 match against Cameron, like, he was stuck on lands, and I ported him, and I think you guys commented on it. It says, like, I look at 3 fetch lands, I just flip them up, and like, shuffle them up.
You're going to be doing it anyways. Yeah.
Yeah. So then round 7, I pair up against Javi and Banff Threshgeddon. He's my one loss of the day. It does not seem like a great matchup. He just kind of outgrinded me. He has so many different answers, questions that he was asking.
You can't really beat a Thornscape Apprentice in game 1 if it resolves, right? Like,
game 2, rather. Yeah.
You kind of have to, yeah. You have to bounce it. You have to stifle it. You
bounce
have to
counter. Yeah. Bounce counter, stifle. Blah.
And you also have to make sure your Dreadnought lives through. Does he have like 4 Disenchant, 4 Swords main deck as well?
Something of the sort. I mean, shout out Javi. He hardcast Roar over the Worm against me in the side event. But anyways, that match is on camera for everyone to relive. Excellent stuff. Javi eventually makes top 8. And then final round. I heard tell of a 45-minute game 1 against Mark Fleury.
Yeah. Well, I'll say one more thing about the match against Javi. I think it was him. It might have been my previous opponent, but there was a game 1. I ended up losing this match. I'm attacking with a 12-12, right? And this is a sign of Chain of Vapor not being super great. But he'd been porting me the whole game. I finally land a 12-12. He doesn't have an answer. He has 3 Treetop Villages and I don't know, it must be a 9/9 Terravore, something out. Somehow he just top decked the Terravore. I draw, I attack. He has enough mana to activate them all. Quadruple blocks. I Flash of Insight. He sacks a land. I counter the counter spell.
So you Chain of Vapor. He sacks a land yet?
Yeah. So I Chain of Vapor the Terravore. He sacks a land. It copies it back onto my Dreadnought. I counterspell the copy.
Oh, you can counterspell the copy?
It's a copy.
I believe you might even be able to.
I thought it was part of the resolution of the spell.
You might even be able to. It is, but it puts a copy on the stack. And I actually believe. I wonder if you can actually stifle it. because it
That's good
says
judge.
No one would ever know.
It starts
and there's
with-
no precedent of this podcast of asking a judge for any clarifications for any reason.
Okay, there's no parenthetical in the rules, but it says if the player does, they may copy the spell and may choose new target for that copy. So
You should
because
be able-
it starts with the word if, I am assuming that what happens is Chain of Vapor resolves in the resolution. Somebody can sack the controller can sack the land, and then a trigger goes on the stack that then puts a copy on the stack. So we'll check this out on Magic Online later, but you might be able to stifle it too. But anyways, you counter the copy.
I'm just realizing this was my first match in the top 8 that I'm against Red Green Oath. Anyway, so anyway, I kind of blow him out. You know, he sacks 3 treetop villages, takes 3 Terravores in his hand, and then he plays it, and it's exactly a 12-12. And one more, he runs away with the game. One less, it's not even close. And anyway, I'm at, I attack, he blocks, and then he wins the top deck war.
Yeah.
Out of that, right? It was
but I thought it would have been a
margins.
heroic. It would have been a heroic story if you then used Flash of Insight to eat lands out of your.
Except for you can't because it's exile
Except
blue
for you
cards.
can't. Yeah.
That would be exciting.
Yeah. That was that was my top 8.
Oh good. We're bouncing around. I did want to. So hold on. So before Javi, you also played. So you played. What was the deck playing before Javi?
Yeah, it was a Bant Thrushgeddon. I think it was mostly green-white, but
so your bad matchups are Goblins, which you beat, Thrushgeddon, which you beat. Presumably, I've been told Contamination is supposed to be a bad matchup, but you beat that too. And it sounds like they were close, but also sounds like you beat them all.
And like the red deck you said was just like that's the match you want.
I mean, yeah, the burn you want. It seems after sideboard games seem really, really close, but
oh yeah, I rocked burn in the side event. It was just, I mean, getting game 1 for free is just too nice. I mean, it's closer because you have to have the Dreadnought. Like you can't just not draw Dreadnought, which you can in many other matchups. But
yeah, I think that matchup is closer than the Dreadnought players think. It goes a lot with who wins the roll in game 1, because like if you guys win the roll, the likelihood of burn winning game 1 is pretty low. But if Burn wins the roll, they have like a plausible chance of winning game 1, and they have real game in sideboarded games unless they took all their blasts out.
I agree.
Right,
so on to Mark Flore and the final round 8. You are X and 1. You're so 6 and 1 going to the final round. It's a win and in.
Yeah, winning in for me. I don't think he can get to the top 8 at this point.
He can. So his breakers, if they're better than Javi's.
702.
602, sure. Yeah. He can get, so 602 would have matched Javi, and then he could get in on breakers, because you guys were at table 7. So tables 1 and 2 drew, but then Javi draws down to 602, and then it goes to breakers.
Yeah, so we had a 45-minute game 1, maybe 40-minute game 1. It was really long game 1. He had the better hands. He just was outcarding me the whole game. I felt like I was kind of in a desperate. He's
playing Mono Blue Dreadnought. He doesn't have Flash of Insight.
He has 1.
Oh, he has 1. Okay.
So I start to shift into need to Vision Charm him to win. I need all 4 of my Vision Charms to resolve, and I start going after him, trying to see if I can snag it. So if I can Vision Charm any of his Vision Charms, that's 1 less Vision Charm that I need. So I start to be a little proactive with the Vision Charms and get most of his Dreadnoughts. He still has a Dreadnought in his deck, but the game got to the point where we both could stack our deck. We both had 1 Vision Charm in our deck. We both had like 7 cards in our decks. He would draw first. I had a Vision Charm, and I could put it anywhere in my deck.
You guys have both Insight piled the bottom of your deck.
Yeah. So he has a Vision Charm somewhere within his deck or in his hand. I need to choose where in my stack of 7 cards to put my Vision Charm. I put it on top. I put it on top after I impulse and stuff, so I know all my cards. And he has it, and he Vision Charms me, and it goes my Vision Charm, and then I'm in a deck. So he wins game 1 in 40 minutes. This seems like I'm no chance for the top 8. I draw my first hand of 7, which had the nut draw game 2. Like I'm looking at the nut draw.
Yeah.
He takes his
jam days foil. Yeah.
It was 100% nut draw. All the good stuff on the play. he is by all means not slow playing at all, but he picks up his first hand, mulligans down to 6. He wants to pile shuffle. I kind of stop him, like, oh no, you're not allowed to pile shuffle twice, and
you should not be allowed to pile shuffle at all. Just saying
anyway,
it right
you
here.
should not be allowed to pile shuffle at all.
You shouldn't be allowed to pile shuffle at all.
It's slow playing. If you aren't doing it just to confirm that you have the functional reason is
it's to count to 60. Yeah,
it's to count to 60. But I think that's a valid reason.
That's fine. But
not when you
no. You get
one
pile shuffle.
Exactly. Point counterpoint. You show up to the tournament. You have 75 cards in your deck box. If you want to count your deck, you count if you have 15 cards on the sideboard. That's all you do. You don't have to pile shuffle your deck.
You could have dropped a card over the BK did in the feature match area.
Don't drop a card. I don't know what to tell you.
It's literally reasonable.
Anyway, so he then mulligans to 6, then mulligans to 5, mulligans to 4, and he is shuffling a lot. And I keep looking back at the judge. He shuffles I drew my hand at 45 minutes. I'm watching him shuffle, and I don't think there's anything malicious. I know there's nothing malicious.
Yeah, you just shuffle. And you also,
he's mulligan down to 4, and they call time before we play a land.
Yeah.
And I look at the judge, and I'm like, come on.
Yeah, yeah.
I have my nut draw in my hand.
Please.
I can win on turn 4, but not on turn 3.
Yeah.
And he gave us extra time. And I mean, Mark did draw his boomerang, which was his only piece of interaction. So I was able to, counter it, and I win game 2. A draw knocks us both out.
And he has to go to breakers. Yeah, he has to go to breakers if he gets the win, and then.
I mean, I think at that point the message to everybody was, X1 makes it, everything else is not going to make it.
All right, then you owe me one. Then you owe me one, bro. Because when I drew with Mark, I got a hold of him later, and I'm like, hey, I think that draw killed us both, but it's okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so he conceded. I bought him a drink. And then we went into the top 8. I owe him a huge one on that one. That's it. That's like the one feel.
It doesn't feel great. I mean, it is what it is. It's tournament magic. It led me to drop in our own New York Discord that I think it'd be reasonable to start brainstorming something that's like gameplay based, that's not orb flips, but like has a good vibe for Premodern to just eliminate draws, period. But that's for another podcast. And then, I did want to say, like, the shuffling thing, like when I heard about, the shuffling, I'm just kind of like, honestly, like, I don't, like, there are moments where I start shuffling and then my mind just wanders and I just like don't know how many times I've shuffled, and then that kind of stuff happens. And then also it's just like, you just got to shuffle, right? It's just annoying, but everyone's got to shuffle. And then some people don't have like high level fast shuffle techniques. So, but stop pile shuffling for the love of Christ.
Yeah. I mean, so that was the end of my Swiss, and honestly, Tide won me 2 of those matches, but not more than 2. Right? I only sideboarded in 2 of the 8 matches that I had.
But you didn't play against any Enchantress Stasis, like just Black Control, no Land Still, no Tide Control. Yeah. Yeah,
but I mean, the tale of 2 kind of tournaments, right? The top 8, it soloed me the top. My top 8 match, it soloed me the top 4 match, and then.
Did you lose game 1 of both of the top of all of your top 8 matches?
I believe I did. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's incredible, right? So you also played from the bottom, right? Because you were in 5 through 8. Yeah.
So I played first against Coyle in the finals,
and he beat you though.
He beat me. He had. He had a crazy good draw on.
He's the first player in the Duress Crew to draw Duress.
Yeah. He Duress, and then had multiple backups, protection for his Dreadnought. It was a crazy nut draw for the blue-black deck.
Speaking of the Duress Crew, I just wanted to shout out Nick Mayo, who you mentioned earlier in this. It is a kick to the cack to start off 6-0 in an 8-round tournament and not make the top 8. Like, Nick was 6-0. It was absolutely brutal, and then just ran the tournament on Saturday, which is what a good man.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hope to make it out to Worcester. Maybe I'll meet you there, Brian.
Yeah, they have a good group of people there.
Yeah. So lots of your top 8 matches are on coverage, but there was 1 or 2 off, or one maybe off coverage, like semis.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was. I think you caught a lot of game 3s.
Okay, yeah.
the game one against Ian was the one where he had the 12-12 Terravore after I...
Right, the story you told, yeah.
Yeah, that story. That was that. And then game two, I think, was on coverage where I got him locked behind his 2 spheres resistances.
Me and Mano had a great time talking about that game, except for we were like mostly talking about not the game, because we just kept on looking over and we're like, the sphere resistance player has no lands in play, and then the 16 land deck has all of his lands in play. Yeah. It's like, I wonder how this one's going to end.
Yeah, next to get flooded.
Brian, this is a pretty salient, I think. You had mentioned to me when we were watching the top 8 of the Saturday tournament, and Lanny was playing against also an Oath Terravore deck. You said like you think that the sideboarded games for the mono blue, Dr. Surf and Turf, is like really favorable in sideboarded games, right? Like 80% or something.
It feels
Can you explain why?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem to me like it should be 80%. Like they're a land destruction deck and you have 16 land.
Yeah, but you can counter every one of their land destruction spells with days.
Most of them are boarded out as well.
Are they? Yeah. Okay.
Well, most Oath players are so allergic to running a land destruction spell into Gush or Daze, which maybe you board out Daze, so maybe you don't even have them, that they board out lots of their land destruction. And they do need to make room for their Call to Herd blasts and naturalizes, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so... They are so threat light, or at least Ian was, that he just gave me plenty of time to set up. A lot of the resources going to dropping a sphere, which it's not great for me, but it's not terrible as long as you're not doing the Dreadnought plan. So you
eventually cast like a 6 or 8 mana Dreadnought though, right? And then you just get him with it.
You could, but like in this case, like there was no pressure. And
you're not in a hurry.
They what are they going to do? Cast 5 and 6 mana Call the Herds? And I guess they can start attacking with Treetop Villages, but then that just kind of feeds right into your into the tide once you get to that point.
Yeah. And the big thing, this happened to me. My opponent wanted to get some damage in. So in my top 8 match against Oath Ponza, my opponent activated Treetop instead of porting me. And I was like, thanks. Yep. I was like, tied you. It's like...
Yeah. And when they do tide you, you just use the mana and just Flash of Insight, opt. Yep. You just like try to hit your land drops, right? And
when they port you, you gotta just sneak all your stuff in.
Yeah, they're just slowing their clock down, giving you time to set up, and especially with tide, like it's just all their Mistress Factories, if they run them, and Treetop Villages just get destroyed once you land the tide. It just seems so different. Like he was so defeated. Like with his eyes when I cast the first tide when he had 2 spheres out was priceless. His eyes went to like size of the moon.
His soul just left his body.
Reminds me of this story. I don't know if everybody in Premodern is going to appreciate this, but Patrick Sullivan once was like so like defeated. He played a Japanese player's like 3-color aggro deck in a legacy tournament with like a Geist of Saint Traft. He's playing against a mono red player, and he cast the card Lightning Helix against the mono red player, and he's just like, "Is this what it feels like?" And he's just like, "This is crazy. This feels so different. Is this what it's like?" You'd only ever experienced it from the other side.
You can beat Lightning Helix. You just respond with your skull crack.
I hate you. You're a terrible person. But no one has ever successfully done that. That's part of the problem. They've never done that.
All right, we got to get Brian to his kid's soccer. So, just what else? What else you got, Brian? Tell us the end of the story.
No, tide was key, top 8. Tide was key, top 4 match, and the finals was super close. It was probably unfavorable for the mono blue player for me, but he got stuck on lands, and I was able to beat him down.
Dr. Surf and Turf, baby.
Dr. Surf and Turf.
So, are you going to play another blue-based deck with your white-bordered Mistress Factories to win Lobstercon next year? right? Like, are you taking applicants for white bordered Mishra's Factory blue decks? You know,
I think Brian
I even have
knows.
black bordered ones too. I have black bordered like German ones, and those are just the ones that were in the deck.
They're just like in the deck box. Yeah.
Is it the same impulses also, Brian?
Yeah, probably.
I mean, I know the first person Brian's going to be calling when he's looking for technology for next year's. I mean, I can't
Is
like
it Dr. Surf and Turf?
it's the doctor, the good doctor himself. I mean, it's like, to me, it's actually funny. I love having this conversation, but like I was emotional. Like the weekend made me emotional just because I felt like it just like lit the fire, and it was just like a beautiful thing to see. Just like, I think contemporary Magic has really killed off the quote unquote deck of the tournament style stuff. I mean, some crushers like Jason Yee are still doing that sort of stuff in contemporary Magic, but for the most part, the idea that somebody just shows up and has something that nobody else does and then uses it to crush, like, I don't know, it reignited the passion. Because it's so funny, everybody's like congratulating me after winning the side event, and I was like, I don't even care, because I mean, I care, obviously it's nice, but like I was just like, I just want to do what Raska did. Like I was just like, okay, this can be done. Like, you can break it, and we should be trying to break it. We shouldn't be just like adding a little weird, I mean, we should be trying to complete the puzzle. I think that's the big thing. It's like, I think that it's amazing to watch the deck go from this like sort of concept with like a few pieces, and then just kind of everything just gels together. The puzzle fits together, and so I was
not just that. Just you look at the sideboard mapping he put together. Yeah. It was like, I've never, I always thought, sideboard mapping, I can kind of figure it out.
Just
vibes on the game. Maybe you want to do that when you're kind of making your sideboard, but like the way he kind of communicated like game plan when with the sideboard mapping is unreal. He sideboards out against Stasis 4 Dreadnoughts, 4 Vision Charms. He's 100% Mishra Factory beatdown.
Yep, same for Enchantress. And I played against both Stasis and Enchantress in the side event.
And did they both work?
Yep. It worked. I mean, it would have worked if I didn't get heckin' bamboozled, but
it was
against Stasis. Against Stasis, it was great. And what I loved about it is that my favorite thing, I talked about this way too much in the Drive Home podcast, but I was just like, look, this guy, he just wrote one sentence on all of these. And like that sentence plus the guide, like just contained so much information. And it was just like, every single sentence is an unlock. And, in the era, and, no offense to the people who are writing, 10,000 word guides. Those are great. Those are really awesome for bringing somebody up to speed. But for him to send a PDF that's like not even a complete spreadsheet with just one-liners on a few matchups, and have given, like, for me, because you had your hands on the deck, I had not played a single game with the deck, and so when he gave me the guide and the lines, I was just like, wow, like I feel like I'm holding the Rosetta Stone. Like I don't even know. It was just like so much info. It was just like. It just changed everything. It's just like just one line, counterfactor fiction, or like mill them, or like, factory beats,
Yeah, that was the thing that was surprising to me when you would shared some of those sentences with me, Lanny. You're just like, no plan. What are you talking about? There's like no brain freeze. Just like, no, you just get a random value vision charm at some point in the next 56 turns.
Yeah, or right? Sideboard up to 64 cards. I was just like, who thinks of this? Like, who's just like sideboard up to 64 cards? Like, you don't know what your opponent, like, this is for the Dreadnought Mirror. He's like, you don't know what your opponent's going to bring, so just bring everything for your opponent, and then whatever they don't bring, you pitch to misdirection. I'm like, good God. Like, this, like, how? I was like, I need to find out how, and we'll have Raska on, and we'll talk about it, but she's like, Wakanda,
He's just
man.
got a lab.
Yeah.
He's got Shuri, and she's
Shuri's lab. Yeah.
She's tied up in the lab with vibranium chains. So she's not leaving the lab. She's just producing technology.
All right. Shuri is voluntarily cooking in her lab. She doesn't need to be held there against her will. Not sure why. I mean, is that an issue of the comic or something? Am I missing something?
No, I'm just riffing on.
Okay.
What you're saying.
Brian, congrats. Thank you for taking the time in between your kids' soccer practice. Are your kids soccer champions? Do they also? What's your family think? Did you come home and you're like, hey, did it again? And they're like, sweet. Can you pack our lunch or what?
Yeah, it's pretty close. And I mean, I went back for old school, and I was in contentions to get to the top 8 of old school too until the final round.
Yeah.
And my daughter's like,
when are you coming home?
She's like, so you're gonna come home with a second lobster trophy, Dad? And it's like. She's like, expect it. I was like, no, there's still a really small chance of me actually.
Oh, so she just thinks that nobody can beat you, right?
She just thinks that like I just go play Magic and I just win.
Yeah,
that's her view.
She's like, once a year, my dad's gone for a weekend and he comes back with these really strange trophies and no money.
And no money. And
shout out to all Lobstercon attendees. I think we got the final number. It's like close to $30,000 raised for Room to Grow. Great job, everybody. And if you missed it, one of the sweetest things was DFB saying like, hey, this charity normally, so $25,000. This charity doesn't normally get big ticket items off their wish list like strollers and whatnot, and so the old school and pre-modern community is really coming through. So great stuff. Brian's doing fine. He likes his lobster. He doesn't need any any swag. Oh, you gotta tell us about the recurring nightmares and survivals and your opponents. I forgot about that.
Right. So I was starting to put a lot of pressure on myself leading up to this tournament, like feeling I had expectations to live up to, which is stupid because this is a for fun tournament and everyone there it's a great community, a bunch of people I like.
But you have the fire.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't like winning, right? If you're playing, you're not playing Magic just to lose games.
I don't know. Right? As a former black-green player, I assume that you don't like winning that much, but
you won the world championship with that black.
I know.
I sure did.
It was probably like $40,000 or something in like $1998. So that's I assume like $1 million in 2024 inflation dollars.
So I wanted to like reduce the stress on me a little bit and try to not. 2 years ago, I played a meme deck. I just played my gold bordered deck plus a squee. Last year, one with land still. But I just wanted to reduce the stress a little bit. So I just opened up, had a couple of my World Championship decks, got a stack of survivals, a stack of recurring nightmares, and figured if anyone beat me, I'd give them a signed survival of the fittest. For everyone I beat, I'd give them a signed recurring nightmare. And I certainly gave out a lot more signed recurring nightmares.
Good beats.
I gave out one.
You were rewarded with a survival of the fittest at the end of the day, though, right?
I was. I had
replaced the one that you gave to Javi.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have
2 stamped first place.
Yeah, halfway to a playset.
Oh my Lord! Well, we're gonna have to stop you from completing that playset, Brian. It's been a pleasure. I'm sure we're just going to be having the same conversation next year, but maybe we'll give you to Will next year after you inevitably win the 2025 North American Premodern Championships. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I mean,
I appreciate it.
Good beats. Just like, what a story. Love to see it.
Yeah.
And it just means that we just have to work twice as hard, huh? We got
only twice.
Yeah, probably 3 times as hard. Yeah.
If you just start with like my baseline and then double that, I don't think that it's enough.
Well, maybe Raska will we'll take a breather. He'll be like, that's good. I mean, because I talked to some of the Rochester guys, and they're like, well, not all of his decks are like this. He's just like, he designed my domain deck, not my domain deck, but like one of the Rochester guys played domain in day 2, and he was like, he designed that deck too. It didn't have the same spark. I'm like, well, they can't all be dreadnoughts. What can you say? But yeah, Dr. Surf and Turf. Excited to talk to him. Stay tuned for that next week. Yeah, and we'll hit you up. I feel like a year between hangs is too long, so we'll have to try to meet at Worcester and link up and get some quality time.
So I might have a New York trip in me this year.
Let's go. For pre-modern. Like if we tell you we're having a tournament.
It would be the pretense, of coming out would be some pre-modern tournament, but then bring the family and kids out.
Let's go. All right. All right. I love the sound of that. You know who to call. You know where to find us.
I do. All right. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. Love the podcast.
Yeah. Likewise. Love Spy Colony.
Bye.
Good.